there is something most people never notice. They believe they are making choices in the present, weighing possibilities with a clear and rational mind. They imagine that each decision begins the moment they become aware of it, but beneath every thought, beneath every preference, beneath every hesitation, something older is already whispering, a forgotten memory, a wound that never truly healed, a story you once believed about yourself without ever realizing it. What if the life you call your own has been quietly shaped by moments you can barely remember? Most people believe the past is behind them. They think time moves in a straight line, carrying old experiences farther away with each passing year. But I came to understand something very different. The past does not remain where it happened. It settles inside the psyche, where it continues its work in silence. It does not ask for permission. It simply waits, influencing the way you love, the risks you avoid, the people you trust, and even the dreams you convince yourself are impossible. If you have ever found yourself repeating the same mistakes, choosing the same kind of relationships, or feeling an invisible resistance whenever life offers you something new, this may explain everything. The problem is not a lack of intelligence, nor is it a lack of willpower. Almost nobody realizes that the unconscious mind remembers what the conscious mind has forgotten. And what remains unconscious never disappears. It simply changes its disguise. Stay with me until the end, because together we will uncover why your past continues to control your present decisions, why most people never escape this invisible cycle, and how the hidden parts of your own psyche may already be waiting to time set you free. There is a peculiar image that has remained with me throughout my life. Imagine walking through a dense forest at dawn. The path ahead appears clear, yet beneath your feet lie roots that have grown for decades. You do not see them, but they determine where you stumble. Human life is much the same. We notice the visible path, but we forget the invisible roots beneath it. When I studied the human soul, I discovered that every meaningful experience leaves an imprint. Some become treasured memories. Others sink into the unconscious because they are too painful, too confusing, or too frightening to face. Yet the unconscious is not a graveyard. It is fertile soil. Whatever is buried there continues to grow. A child who is constantly criticized may become an adult who fears success. Not because success is dangerous, but because deep within, achievement became connected with rejection. Every opportunity awakens an old emotion. Every decision becomes a conversation with a forgotten past. This is where almost everyone misunderstands the process. They try to change their future by changing their habits alone. They wake earlier, read more books, set clearer goals, and force themselves toward discipline. These things have value, but if the hidden roots remain untouched, the tree continues to bear the same fruit. The unconscious always seeks familiarity before freedom. That is why people often choose what hurts them over what heals them. Familiar suffering feels safer than unfamiliar happiness. I once observed that people do not simply remember their past. They relive it through symbols, emotions, and relationships. The face changes, but the pattern remains. Consider a woman who repeatedly finds herself with emotionally distant partners. She tells herself she is unlucky. Yet if she looks deeply enough, she may discover that emotional distance was the language of love she learned in childhood. Her unconscious is not searching for happiness. It is searching for recognition. Or think of a man who refuses every opportunity that could transform his life. To others, he appears afraid of failure. But hidden beneath that fear may be something even deeper. The fear of becoming someone his family never believed he could become. This is the strange paradox of the psyche. We often protect the very prisons we wish to escape. But this is not the deepest layer. Beneath every painful memory lives what I called the shadow. Most people imagine the shadow as something dark and evil. They mistake it for anger, jealousy, or selfishness alone. Yet the shadow is much larger than that. It contains every part of yourself that you were taught to reject. Perhaps you learned that crying was weakness, so your sensitivity entered the shadow. Perhaps your confidence made others uncomfortable, so your strength disappeared into the darkness. Perhaps your imagination was mocked, so your creativity quietly went into hiding. Years later, these rejected parts do not vanish. They influence your choices from behind the curtain. You avoid opportunities that would require confidence, because confidence feels unfamiliar. You silence your emotions because vulnerability once brought pain. You remain smaller than your true nature, because your shadow has become stronger than your conscious identity. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives trying to become better versions of the mask they wear, while neglecting the person hidden beneath it. I call this mask the persona. The persona is necessary. We all wear one. It allows us to function in society. But when the persona becomes your identity, every decision begins serving the expectations of others instead of the truth. Within yourself, you choose careers to earn approval. You remain silent to avoid conflict. You say yes when every part of your soul longs to say no. Slowly, the distance between who you appear to be and who you truly are becomes unbearable. This inner division creates enormous psychological tension. Many mistake this tension for anxiety or confusion, yet often it is simply the soul asking to be reunited with itself. Nature offers a remarkable lesson. A river never struggles to become a mountain. It simply follows its own course. Yet imagine forcing that river into channels built by someone else. At first it obeys, but eventually the pressure grows until the water breaks through every artificial barrier. The human spirit behaves in exactly the same way. The unlived life never stops calling. Sometimes it appears as restlessness, sometimes as envy, sometimes as dreams so vivid they linger long after morning arrives. These are not random experiences. They are messages from the unconscious inviting you toward wholeness. Many people fear looking backward because they believe they will become trapped there. Yet I discovered the opposite is true. You become trapped only by the past you refuse to understand. The moment you bring unconscious patterns into awareness, they begin to lose their invisible authority. Awareness does not erase pain, but it transforms your relationship with it. Instead of being driven by forgotten memories, you begin observing them with quiet clarity. That is the beginning of individuation, not becoming someone new, but becoming who you were before fear taught you otherwise. This journey is rarely comfortable. Like walking into a dark cave carrying only a small lantern, each step reveals another hidden chamber. Yet every discovery also returns a forgotten piece of yourself. And something extraordinary happens. The decisions that once felt impossible begin to feel natural. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your choices no longer belong to yesterday. They belong to the person you are finally becoming. In the end, the greatest prison is not the past itself. It is believing the past has the final word. The roots beneath the tree may shape its beginning, but they do not decide how far its branches can reach toward the light. The unconscious remembers everything, yet it also holds the blueprint for your freedom. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all. The past continues to control your present only until the moment you have the courage to meet it. Not as an enemy, but as the forgotten guide that has been waiting, patiently and silently, to lead you back to yourself. The strange thing is that people often imagine freedom as the absence of influence. They say, I want to make my own decisions. Yet very few stop to ask a more important question. Who is the I that is making those decisions? Is it the conscious self that speaks with confidence? Or is it an older voice, one formed long before you had the language to question it? This question haunted me for many years. I observed brilliant men who repeatedly destroyed every opportunity they were given. I watched compassionate women remain loyal to people who never valued them. On the surface, these choices appeared irrational. But when I looked beneath the surface, I discovered that every action was perfectly logical to the unconscious mind. The unconscious does not seek what is best. It seeks what is familiar. This is why a person can leave a painful environment, yet recreate the same emotional atmosphere somewhere else. A child who grows up surrounded by criticism may later find a workplace where criticism is constant. Someone abandoned in love may unknowingly choose partners who keep them emotionally distant. They believe fate is against them, but in reality, an invisible pattern is repeating itself. The psyche is like an ancient architect. It quietly rebuilds the same house, using different materials. The walls may change, the faces may change, even the city may change, but the blueprint remains the same until it is seen. There is another misunderstanding that prevents people from breaking free. Most believe that healing means forgetting. It does not. Nothing meaningful is ever erased from the psyche. Even memories that seem lost continue to influence the emotional landscape of your life. The goal is not to delete the past, but to place it where it belongs. Imagine carrying a heavy stone in your hands every day. After many years, you no longer notice its weight because it has become normal. When someone suggests putting it down, you hesitate, not because the stone is valuable, but because your identity has adapted to carrying it. Many people mistake emotional burden for personality. I have always been anxious. I have always doubted myself. I have always feared rejection. Listen carefully to these words. They sound like descriptions, but they are often stories. Stories written by experiences that happened decades ago. The danger begins when you confuse those stories with your identity. You are not the wound. You are the one who carries it. And what is carried can eventually be laid down. But before that happens, something else must be understood. The unconscious speaks in symbols. It rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it appears through dreams, sudden emotional reactions, recurring conflicts, and unexpected attractions. Perhaps you meet someone for the first time, and an unreasonable feeling of distrust immediately arises. Logic tells you they have done nothing wrong, yet your body responds as though danger is already present. Why? Because the unconscious does not react to the person standing before you. It reacts to someone from your past who lives within them, as a symbol. This is projection, one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Projection allows old experiences to disguise themselves as present reality. You think you are responding to today. In truth, yesterday has quietly entered the room. This is why awareness is such a rare form of power. The moment you pause and ask yourself, is this reaction truly about this moment? Or is something older speaking through me? You interrupt a pattern that may have ruled your life for years. That single moment of reflection creates a space between you and the unconscious. And within that space, something extraordinary becomes possible. Choice, real choice, not the automatic decision shaped by forgotten pain, but a conscious response born from understanding. This is the beginning of inner authority, not controlling others, not controlling circumstances, but no longer being controlled by what you have never examined. Many people spend their entire lives searching for confidence. Yet confidence is rarely found by looking forward. More often, it is discovered by turning inward and making peace with what has been hidden. The soul does not become stronger by escaping its past. It becomes stronger by transforming its relationship with it. Like raw iron entering the fire, it emerges changed, not because the fire was pleasant, but because it revealed a new form that was always possible. There is, however, one moment on this journey that almost everyone fears. It is the moment when the old identity begins to fall apart. At first, this feels like failure. The beliefs that once gave you certainty begin to crack. Decisions that once seemed obvious suddenly feel empty. The goals you chased for years lose their meaning, and you may wonder if you have become lost. But I learned that this confusion is not always a sign that something is wrong. Very often, it is the first sign that something real is finally beginning. Nature teaches this lesson again and again. Before spring arrives, winter appears to have won. The trees stand bare. The fields seem lifeless. Yet beneath the frozen ground, invisible work is taking place. The roots are not dead. They are preparing for a different season. The psyche follows the same rhythm. Before genuine transformation, there is almost always a period of inner winter. Most people panic during this stage. They rush to fill the silence with distractions. They return to old habits simply because those habits feel familiar. They convince themselves that change was a mistake. But this is where almost everyone turns back. And this is why so few people experience true freedom. The unconscious tests your willingness to let go of the person you once believed you had to be. This process is what I described through the ancient symbol of alchemy. The old alchemists believed they were transforming ordinary metals into gold. But beneath their experiments was a far deeper truth. The real transformation was never about metal. It was about the human soul. Every person must pass through a psychological fire. The first stage is darkness, where certainty disappears. The second is purification, where false identities begin to dissolve. And only then does the final stage emerge, a quieter, more authentic self that no longer depends on fear for direction. Few people recognize this process while they are living it. They only understand it when they look back. Have you ever noticed that the greatest turning points in your life often felt like endings? The loss of a relationship, the collapse of a career, the failure of a dream. At the time, these moments seem cruel, but years later, they often reveal themselves as necessary doorways. The psyche has a mysterious intelligence. Sometimes it removes what your conscious mind refuses to release, not to punish you, but to make room for a life that better reflects your true nature. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is not trying to sabotage you. Even your fears often began as forms of protection. A child learns to stay quiet because speaking once led to humiliation. Another learns to please everyone because conflict once threatened love. These strategies are intelligent responses to pain. The tragedy is that they continue long after the danger has disappeared. The child grows into an adult. The world changes. The circumstances change. But the unconscious continues, following instructions written decades earlier. Imagine sailing across the ocean using a map drawn by someone who had never seen the waters ahead. No matter how skilled the captain may be, the journey will eventually lead in the wrong direction. This is exactly what happens when your present decisions are guided by an outdated psychological map. The map once kept you safe. Now it keeps you small. Real maturity begins when you are willing to redraw that map, not by rejecting your past, but by understanding why it shaped you the way it did. There is profound compassion in this realization. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you begin asking, "What happened that taught me to see the world this way?" That single question changes everything. It replaces shame with curiosity. It replaces self-hatred with understanding. And understanding opens a door that force never can. Because no one heals by fighting the unconscious. The unconscious responds only to awareness. Like a frightened animal emerging from the shadows, it cannot be dragged into the light. It must be approached with patience, with honesty, and above all, with courage. For courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to look directly at the places within yourself that you once avoided. Only then does the past begin to loosen its grip, not because it has disappeared, but because it is no longer hidden,